Right now, though, what's on our show today? Well, we got a pretty good one for you. We have Springbok going to be here. We're going to be talking with Elie Spitz, and he's going to be talking to us about kind of joy, happiness. He has a great perspective on words and how they affect us and how they can affect others. So stay tuned for that. Bree's got that interview.
So please join me in welcoming Elie Spitz.
Rachel Barnes. I am so impressed. Rachel asked me a couple months ago if I would come and spend time with you talking on this topic of gossip. And I was happy to do so. And as this day grew closer, I only grew more aware of what an amazing organizer Rachel is. And I thought in those 15 years she was a member of my community, I underused her. So I am so glad that she has taken her energy and her talent to enriching the lives here in the village. The topic of gossip, at first impression, seems what's really to talk about. It's, you shouldn't gossip. End of story. And yet, all of us, and I had a great teacher, and that's, some of you may know Rabbi Bernie King, who had been the rabbi at Shir Hamalo. When I came to Orange County in 1988, he said, whenever you're speaking as a rabbi, know that you're really just talking to yourself and you're letting other people listen in. Which is to say, whatever I'm going to share are lessons that I need to relearn for myself, because we all falter. We all overreact to words said to us. We all, at times, talk about others. We all have parts of our life that are not things we want talked about. Imagine if you were coming in this door and you knew that people were talking about you. Each of us can do this little mind game. What would be one thing you would hope they weren't saying about you? Because would it be something to do with a shortcoming that you know is a shortcoming in yourself? Is it something that you did unthinkingly that you're a little embarrassed by in the past? So if you pause and you think what you would not want other people to be saying, know that that's precisely what we talk to each other about other people. Take the people that are closest to you, that you love. Imagine if all the things you said about them was repeated to them in your name. How embarrassed you might feel. Because we all tend to do that. We all tend, even the people we love, to speculate and to share what you heard, which is to say, how we use our tongues is often done without a lot of self-awareness, and at the same time, for all of us, we've all been hurt by what has been said about us, even if it's true, let alone if it's false, and how juicy, how fun, and unthinking it is to talk, to tell. Know that in the Jewish tradition, there are 3 different categories of misuse of the tongue. The most extreme is called motzi shem ra, to bring out a bad name for somebody else. That's bringing out information that is probably untrue, accusing somebody of something that you think might be the case. Colbert, years ago, coined the word truthiness, which is, it sounds like it could be true, even if you haven't verified it, and it's fun. Let me pause over this issue of fun. When we watch television, we like drama. We like the tension. We like also seeing the mighty fall. Somebody pointed out, it's Rabbi Joseph Telushkin who wrote a wonderful book years ago on this topic. He pointed out that most of us don't gossip about people, if you will, that are at a lower social rung. We don't gossip about the gardener, about the waiter. We tend to gossip about people at our tier or higher. That's what the TV is. People who are the rich and the famous. And what motivates us to want to hear what makes it juicy in part is when we hear about their difficulties, how challenged their family life is. I'm so pained. I have no real clue about Prince Harry and Meghan. I have no idea if they're good people or bad people. I just don't know. I have no opinion, really. But in my news feed, there are some news feeds that are constantly saying the most awful things about them, always with that tone. Precisely because it's a would-be king and a would-be American princess, queen. They're just juicy. To knock them down is to feel elevated for some on an unconscious level. So, motzi shem ra. Now know that the motzi shem ra, the bringing out of a bad name, the creating of a bad name for somebody, is identified in the Bible with people that we would otherwise admire. Back to our only talking to ourselves. Even the people we admire misuse their tongue. Which is also to add, and I'll come back to this is also a talk about forgiveness of ourselves and of others, because this is a natural human foible. The rabbis identify a punishment for this severe category. We don't have it in the same way, namely leprosy. It is no less than Miriam, Moses' sister. This is a story that was read in the Torah just a week ago, who speaks to her brother Aaron, that's Moses' older brother, about Ha'isha HaKushit, about the black woman that Moses married. Zipporah is her name in the Bible. Now, it doesn't say what she said to Aaron about Miriam. And the rabbis will enter into this gap in the tale and have two very different positions. One is they're gossiping about the fact that he married this non-Israelite black woman. So she's the sister-in-law, saying, can you believe what our brother did? But the other group of rabbis say, no, she's defending Miriam. And she's saying, can you believe that our brother believes he's so holy he's no longer sleeping with his wife? In either case, and we don't know. And in some ways, for the Bible, that's not the critical point. The critical point is family members talking behind the back of a family member. And that's often the most painful kind of gossip. On two levels, because it's the people we love, but it's also people who know our buttons. Sadly, as a rabbi for over 3 decades, there are so many families that would be in front of me when I would speak at high holidays with members who had cut off relations with each other, often about something that had been said about them or their spouse. Yep. It's just how it is, and it's painful. So back to the story of Moses and Miriam and Aaron. She develops leprosy. And Aaron, who is listening, is also punished, though not with leprosy. And he comes, and the rabbis will add that to listen to gossip is not quite as bad, but as bad as the one who speaks it. And therefore you too are responsible. The rabbis of the Talmud will say there are 3 people who are injured when gossip is said. The person about who is spoken, in this case Moses, and the person who speaks, Miriam, and the person who listens, Aaron. Each is injured. And so she develops leprosy. And the rabbis will say in the Bible, Motzi Shem Ra, the taking out a bad name for somebody else. When you take those 3 words and you smush them together, the acronym, you bring them together, it's Mitzora, leprosy. There's another case of leprosy. God says to Moses, Moses, I want you to go into Egypt and talk to Pharaoh and let my people go. And Moses begs off 5 times. Can you imagine if God says, I got a job for you, and you go, no, I think you're wrong, God? 5 times Moses begs off. And one time Moses says, look, they're not going to believe me. And then God says to Moses, take your hand and put it into your coat. He does. He brings it out, and he has leprosy. And the rabbis will comment that Moses is putting down the Jewish people, the Israelites. And so, Motzi Shem Ra. His assuming they won't believe him is already a judgment against the Israelites. Those are the 2 cases. But we don't have that kind of radar. We don't have that moral, physical sign of leprosy. So that's category 1. That's the extreme. Motzi Shem Ra. There is another category, and that's called Lashon Hara, bad speech, even of things that are true. So it's not speculating or criticizing the things that Miriam was accused of. It's telling things that you may share, and that's Lashon Hara, that lowers a person's social standing. It can even be talking about how rich they are, which may be true. They're so rich that, fill in the blank. That's a way of also labeling somebody, and it's fun and juicy, all the more because they are so rich that it's natural to get a certain kind of titillation by talking about it. But that too is considered not the conversation you would have. And here's the test. If the person was standing next to you, would you say it with them listening in? They're so rich that, and they're listening, and clearly it would be embarrassing to them to be talked about in that way, for most. And that is the second category. People say, but if it's true, I'm not lying, I'm not making it up. And everybody knows it's true. Everybody knows this person's really rich. So what's the harm in my talking about it? The harm is it lowers yourself to that is how you are categorizing and labeling others, and it would not be comfortable. That too, on the highest level of being mindful of our lips. And last, there's another category, and that's called rechilut. And the Bible will say, just in the verses where it says, love your neighbor as yourself, right before that it will say, Lo telech b'rechilut ba'amecha. Don't go around telling tales among your people. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. Don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. That's the same verse. And so what is rechilut? That's the third category. Rechilut is hearsay. It's like, I heard, did you hear? Did you hear? And it has almost legs. The rabbis will say rechilut has legs. It's things you might have heard that you're now spreading, which is different than it's overlapping with that of Lashon Hara. It's not necessarily looking to paint somebody bad. It's simply talking. That is the gossip. Rechilut is the talking about others, which you might think, well, that could be neutral. But all too often, that sharing of did you hear becomes, for the rabbis in the Talmud, embarrassment to the one who is being spoken of. Hence, the word, the second half of that verse, don't spill the blood of your neighbor, is understood as, look how a person's face changes when they're embarrassed. That is like the spilling of their blood. And so therefore, how you use words, even if your intention is simply just talking, can be harmful to others. When Rachel invited me to go on to promote this on your local TV station, Rachel and I had time to talk before I went on Wednesday to do that, and we both talked about this injury that we had received at different points in our childhood. I was at a summer camp. I don't know if you saw this little clip, but I was at a summer camp, and I was about 10 years old. It was Parents' Day. Kids were prepared to sing a Hebrew song. It was a Jewish camp to greet all the parents. I'd never been in a choir before, and we were preparing. I'm singing, and the choir director says, Larry, that was my name before, still my name, Ravelli. Larry, why don't you go help them park cars on Parents' Day? You're throwing the choir off. You can't sing. And I was just, again, I had never sung in a choir before, but I was really embarrassed in front of all my peers. Now, the person who said this to me was feeling probably his own pressures to present the camp and to impress the parents. It was on how he would look and wanted the choir to sound good. He didn't think about it. I was embarrassed, and it grew. It's like one of those wounds that you have, that you get as a kid, and somebody says something about you. They're not thinking about the impact. They're only thinking about their agenda, which is to have this choir sound good. True. But when I would begin to sing, I would feel self-conscious. Am I throwing other people off around me? The idea of the power of the tongue is in that story that I was injured by something that was said in a moment, not probably thinking, not probably intending to hurt me, but all the more as a child, took hold and grew on some levels. How we use words are often done without us thinking about them. Sometimes, and I've seen this, people talk without a filter. They're just expressing emotions. And 5 minutes later, the emotions have shifted, because emotions flow through us and they come and go, and they're like now using their minds, and what they just said, which was hurtful and harsh, is no longer what they're saying. So we're all guilty of that. Here's one more story, since we're still talking about Moses and the misuse of tongues. And why not Moses? Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the rabbis say, is our teacher. So his downfall. His downfall is the people are complaining. He's been leading them for 40 years, and they complain a lot. They're complaining there's no water. And early, when they first came out of Egypt, they're complaining, you might have freed us from slavery, God, but there's no food, there's no water. And God again, in the very beginning, but a few days into freedom, God says, go over to this rock, strike the rock, and water will flow. It's now 40 years later. And they're in the desert, and the people are complaining. And Moses, with his brother Aaron next to him, says, Shimu na, listen up. Shimu na, right? I want to make sure I get it right. Hamorim, the rebels. Haman Hasela Hazed, do you think from this rock, Notzi Mayim, we will bring forth water for you?